So Miranda, I'm going to be leading tonight.
You are leading tonight. I just realized I was like, oh, Tom probably doesn't know.
No,
So,
I
hey
didn't.
there, surprise.
I mean,
Welcome.
this is really, I wasn't planning on being here at all. I just,
Yeah.
okay, so I'm not super prepared. So let's see what happens.
What we'll do is when we're ready, we'll call the meeting to order. Macy will still roll call just so we know we have a
Yep.
record of who's here. Rita and I will do the presentation, and then if you can just lead the discussion amongst the Board of Trustees, that's all we'd be looking for tonight.
Okay. And I've got the packet open,
And I think
and
you actually have.
the budget,
Ugly budget.
the ugly budget. Yeah.
And Tom, you have everyone we're expecting tonight, so if you want to start right on
Oh,
time, you can.
okay. Let's make it let's change our ways and do something different. Let's call the meeting order at 9 o'clock Eastern. Very, very late, European, but 7 o'clock Colorado time. Macy, can you take the roll call, please?
Yeah, Trustee Blakemore.
Here.
Trustee Corvalon.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Maholt.
Here.
And Trustee Sterling.
Here.
Excuse me, Trustee Severs as well, please.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds like we have a quorum. Okay,
We sure do, and we're gonna just jump right into it then.
okay. I guess let's go to the first. This will be the first discussion item. It's 2023 budget. Miranda, please get us started.
Yep, so tonight is your first work session on the 2023 budget. So Town Treasurer Rita Six and I will review this presentation we prepared, and then we'd just love to have a pretty informal initial discussion about the budget as it stands right now. The objectives today are to examine the tax revenue and to review fund balances as well as reserve balances. We're going to do an assessment of the revenue and expenditures by fund. We won't go line item by line item, but just kind of a general review for you. I'll do a quick highlight of department capital improvement priorities. We'll talk about some of the personnel changes that are in this budget. And then the last thing is really open session, feedback, questions, comments. And then we would like to review with you the calendar for the budget cycle for this year. We have made some amendments, so we'd like some feedback on that. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Rita.
Thank you. Before I start, I wanted to say a couple things. I wanted to welcome Nicole, and also wanted to thank the board for approving the bonuses for the 22 supplemental budget. I personally appreciated that very much. Okay, sales tax revenue. I am proposing a 3% increase over the 21 actuals. And the reason being, that's actually the lowest that I've done since I've started. But in looking at this chart, the 2022 actuals as of July, and by the way, so sales tax revenue is received 2 months in arrears. So what you're seeing here, the data is through July, and July was actually received in September. So really actuals, we are trending just about the same as we were back in 21. So I'm being conservative at 3%. Not sure if that needs to be even lower, but anyway, that is my recommendation for tax revenue increases. If we were to go with the 3%, that would give us a total of the 3% of the 2.173109 million would be $65,000 of increase in sales tax revenue.
Rita, if we're trending the same as those previous 2 years, why would we expect it'll go up 3%?
It's not the previous 2 years, Tom. If you look at 2020 was 1.8 million, and then of course there was a big jump, right? In 21 to 2.1 million.
So we're tracking with 21.
Yes, sir. So, like I said, that's data through July.
Yeah.
I was kind of waiting, this is just the beginning, right, of our sessions. So
Yeah.
what I'm thinking is that could be adjusted once I have a couple more months of data, maybe, because I should be receiving August's data here any day. But like I said, right now we're so close to last year's that, like I said, I may go down on that 3%.
Yeah, we're doing pretty well. I mean, we thought COVID might have something to do with the jump from 20 to 21.
Yes, but
COVID's
if I
not here.
remember right, our attorney also mentioned that had something to do with the online marijuana uh, sales tax or something like that. That, they
Okay.
did online sales tax as well. That's why the big jump in 21 as well.
Okay, well,
Rita. Oh, sorry, go
I
ahead.
think we better, yeah, I'd like to see the numbers as they come out, especially for the rest of the summer months.
Sure.
I think that's really good news that it's tracking well.
Sure. And again, it would be a $65,000 increase, right?
Yeah.
And that's just so when we get into each fund, that's the assumption I did. I did a 3% increase, which, like I said, overall combined in all is 65,000, which then gets divvied up between the different funds. Anyway.
Who was about to say something? Was it you, Karen?
No, it was me, Tanya. I was
Go
just
ahead.
curious, what year what was it like, where it became mandatory that online sales get sent to the
I think
municipalities?
that's what I think it was in 21.
Oh, so
why
not
we-
that long ago. So before
Correct.
that, we didn't pay any sales tax online, I guess.
That's why I think there's such a big jump, is my understanding.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's not even more, but
Yeah,
yeah.
that's correct. That the online sales trust equivalent does contribute to what we're seeing in 2021 here.
Awesome.
Okay, moving on, property taxes. So property taxes are assessed every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
You can see on this particular slide, it's interesting. It's just a slight decrease of 0.2% compared to the 2022 assessed value. So the current assessed value, which by the way is preliminary, they will give us the finals in November, is at 35,482,486. And if that were to stay the same, the estimated revenue we would be bringing in is 612,900, which is really a slight decrease of 1,100 to the prior year. And so, again, I did the budget is based upon the estimated revenue of $612,924 when we get more into the detailed piece of this.
Why do we think that do we think that property values will decrease for 23?
So what it is, it's assessed every 2 years. If you look, for example, from 2020 was a big jump, right?
You're right.
You look at 2022, that was a big jump to 21. So here,
Right.
I believe it's in 24 when you'll see the bigger jump. In 2023, basically all that it's because it was not assessed. It's just basically new construction that was added.
Got it.
So, or lack of, for that matter. And remember too, how Attorney Mattson had mentioned to us that as of right now, the assessment rate has been 7.15%. That
Right.
is going to change, slightly to 6.8%. So that could be another reason that we're going to see a slight, decrease.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Now let's go to the government funds. And this is a repeat for some of you that have been with the board for a while. You want to go to the next slide, Miranda? So government funds are principally supported by taxes and intergovernmental revenues. Non-major funds include the Conservation Trust Fund and Street Fund. So the general fund balances, when we get into the general fund, include reserves as follows: 110,000 from Boulder County Housing Authority in lieu of dedication of land for public use. Okay. and 36,500 from the parking lease with Eldora, which was approved by the board, so funds could be raised to be used for park improvements. So these reserved funds of 147,000 are held in a separate account, and you know, we will not be spending this unless the board provides directions to staff on how to spend these funds. So those funds have been sitting there for a while. You know, those are the kind of things we can consider, right? Now that, you know, we are struggling with some of our funds. Next slide, please. So the propriety.
Sorry, Rita.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a real quick question. So was the parking lease with Eldora, was that when they were using like the Huerco parking fields last year, or was it from something else?
Oh, no, this is not last year. This is older. Let me pull up. Yeah, so anyway, I took over this document.
That's okay if it's not right at your fingertips.
It's ready. Unless Miranda knows, but what it reads here, this goes back to
It's a few years ago when we, yeah.
18 and 19, exactly right. So, yes, money, let's see.
But it is, yeah, Trustee Sterling, it is from when Eldora used Gershio as
That's
a parking
correct.
lot back in 2019 season. Hasn't happened again. So it's this one-time payment to the town that then's been earmarked for parks improvements. But we've yet to have kind of further discussions. Now that we have a parks department and Nikki Dunn as our parks manager, I do think we can start to talk more about how to use these funds.
Got it. Okay, thank you for the
Exactly.
clarification.
Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. So the town has a couple of proprietary funds that are also called enterprise funds, which are water and our sewer funds. They are operated in a similar manner to a private business. So they are not your typical government funds funded by taxes type of programs and services. The idea is to pay for services provided through fees, which hasn't happened really, and we're having to use tax dollars, and also have had substantial amounts of grants as well as $0 loans. So the net position for sewer and water also, when we get to those two funds, include reserves as follows. 307,000 for the sewer, which can be used for infrastructure improvement and expansion, and 775,000 for water for the same purposes. And I will talk more about how these funds come about when we look at the water and sewer fund.
Rita, I have
again-
a question.
Yes,
When
ma'am.
you say reserves, that means this is money being held in an account to be used for improvements and expansion? Like we have this money, or?
Yes, we do, and that is part of our yes, reserves, they're restricted funds, but they are part of our reserves. We have those funds, yes.
But it's not part of the big reserves, like when we were talking about how much money do we have in savings, when we were talking about the police and all that, and we had just over $1 million something in reserves, that it's not referring to this money, or
No, the water and sewer fund are separate.
separate?
That's
Okay, it's good
correct.
to know. That was
Yes.
my question. Thank
So
you. so much.
overall, right, as of today, we have roughly 5.5 million in reserves. Okay. And of that, like I said, it's about a little bit over $1 million is restricted for water and sewer. And then we have the 147,000 that is restricted in the general fund.
For that, what we just talked about.
Yes.
And is this money just sits in a bank somewhere?
Yeah, it's a separate bank account.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so obviously the general fund is going to be a tricky one this year. And if Tom hasn't seen that yet, he might be shocked.
Yeah, I am.
Good. We all are. Anyhow, so before I really dive into the numbers, what we got to realize in the general fund, we have so many unknowns for 2023, okay? The police department being one of them, right? We don't really know what that's going to look like. And as you can see highlighted in red, we are proposing creating a new department, which is the Parks Department. which is difficult also as far as budgeting goes, because really we have no idea. So those are some unknowns. We budgeted revenue, you know, at 89,000, as you can see. And then of course the expenditure piece at 391,000. However, I do want to point out that Public Works, in other words, Parks was part of Public Works before. That went down by 300,000, but we're going up in expenditure by 391,000 in the Parks Department, okay? So anyway, the general fund does not, and Nicole had asked this earlier, does not include any of the possible revenue that will be decided on during the elections on November 8th. It also does not include, because I don't want to forget to talk about this, any of the computer/server replacements that Randy, our IT guy, is recommending. And there's a separate list that was sent to you guys with those recommendations, and they're quite high, okay? There were 2 server replacements that were recommended for $16,000 each. One was for the PD, and the other one is here at Town Hall. And, you know, once we get into that, we can decide what we want to do there. But my immediate response to that would be that we can certainly hold off, I believe, on the PD server, right? Because we don't know where that's headed next year. So I think we should hold off on that, but we can get into that detail later. I just wanted to let you all know what you're seeing today does not include any possible revenue that we might get from the November 8th election, and neither does it include any of the IT recommendation from Randy. So anyway.
You said it does not include any of his recommendations?
No, sir. Well, not computers or, of course, he gave me his, you know, his estimate for his time and all the other little stuff he does, but just
Yeah.
no computer replacements. None of
Okay.
that you're seeing on that list.
And so that was like the $52,000 price
That's
tag.
correct.
Yeah.
Which,
okay.
of course, I can't remember if it shows on that particular spreadsheet the different departments it's for. It's not all for Town Hall. It's for all kinds of different departments. He abbreviated it, I believe, on the
Yeah.
left-hand side. But again, I think we shouldn't worry too much about that right now. I just wanted you all to know when we look at all these different funds, computers are not included. Okay. So let's see. So what I think is very important, and you will see that highlighted in green in every one of these funds, is to review what happened in 21. Because, for example, we budgeted to have a decrease in the fund balance of 150,000 in the general fund, but instead we ended up increase, excuse me, of 295,000. Okay. So this is important, I think, for the general fund. We had an increase to the fund balance in 21 of $295,000. We had an increase in 2020 of 229,000. To me, that's important because when we look at 23 as it stands right this moment, we are budgeting a decrease of 335,000. So I do just feel like it's important to realize that over the past 2 years, we've increased our fund balance almost, or actually $500,000. Okay.
Rita, I have to ask on these two, you know, we look at the budget and then we look at the actual, and it was ended up quite different. Do you think that we're being overly pessimistic in planning for next year, or is this realistic?
What we're doing now, the
Yeah.
35, that's with what we got, very realistic, I think.
So
Because I think what's happened in the past, really, we were very conservative budgeting sales tax revenue. We
yeah,
were going always pretty low, I think. And then what happened, Tom, and you know this already,
yeah,
personnel, I mean, other than town hall, really, town staff, all the other departments were so understaffed and have been, and really not used up their, allotted amounts. And that's really a lot, I think, is, we received a lot more revenue, but at the same time, we also had a lot less expenditure. And like I have to say, probably your biggest savings would be in the personnel.
Okay.
Okay, so want to keep talking a little bit more in the general fund. So let's see what else. Let's see. So back to, what I think obviously the biggest factors are for that, decrease in 2023 is going to be the police department, is going to be the parks department, right? Again, that's going to be very difficult. The parks department to figure out, what is that really going to look like? Because revenue is budgeted so low, who knows? We might get more, we might not. But with the parks and police being such an unknown, I think even we don't like it, or some of you may not like it, we may have to just let it go for a year. Let's see how it plays out, right? As far as the bottom lines are concerned, because we can get into this line item by line item. It's not going to get us anywhere, really. I mean, we can probably cut a little bit more here and there. And I think Karen has worked on some of that.
Right.
But the truth is, I don't think we can cut much more. And just speaking about all this, I just also wanted to point out, especially for the new members or anybody else that's listening, grants, just so everybody understands, grant revenue is an in and an out the same amount. Okay. When you budget, that's how it works. And what I was telling in some past meetings, when year end comes, I have to make budget adjustments for grants. In other words, we can only put in as revenue what we have spent. In other words, if I spend 10 grand, I can put in 10 grand over as the revenue.
Right.
The exception to the rule is, so for example, ARPA fund, we got funds up front, right? We got 190 grand, let's just say. If I only spent 10,000 of that, all I could put on the books for financial statement purposes was 10,000. But for this purpose here, I just want everybody to know, it really does not matter how many grants we put in here as far as grants revenue is concerned, other than the match, and we'll talk about that separately. But it's an in and an out. Okay. So anyway, back to my opinion here is, my thoughts is that really it's the parks department, it's the police department, and then also, of course, we have some capital expenditures that, you guys can see in a separate slide. That is also one that's obviously a big increase. So
Rita, when you talk about uncertainty, the two biggest ones were on the police department and the parks department. You said something about one of the, I think on the parks department, we kind of know what the expenses are, but there was some uncertainty about revenues. Where would revenues for the park department?
that's correct. So I think what we budgeted for revenue, let's see really quick here. Go ahead.
We
Oh, is this
budgeted,
Nikki?
yeah,
We
it's,
budgeted, let's see,
sorry. I had the number right in front of me.
we budgeted 66,000 only at this point for rink, right?
Correct. And so we said total 89,000, including that's
Right.
our permits.
That includes the 20,000, Nikki, for the C&D program, right? So it's hard to say, right? Are those good numbers? Are they not? And then what we did over on, and again, we'll get into this if we need to when we look at the line items, but what we did for the expenditure piece, either we split what it was over on the public works piece before, let's say if it was $3,000 for phone, we may have split it in two, or Nikki and or Miranda had a very specific ask of some of those other expenditure accounts. So again, if you look at the expenditures on the general fund, public works, we're for 2023, we're estimating 377,000, right? 849. That's down 300,000 because I created the new fund, the Parks Fund, right?
Mhm.
And transferred some of the expenditure out of Public Works into the Parks Fund. But then you see, obviously, Parks has gone up by 391,000, which is a difference of 90,000 between the two. Okay.
Mhm.
And that is something, you all can look at on the detail, and that'll show you what some of the expenditures are that, we guesstimated at some of the, what they might be for the parks.
So, Rita, in theory, it almost breaks even if we do generate $89,000 in revenue, right?
Well, if you look at, not really, if you look at Public Works, we only have 10,000 budgeted for revenue. They don't really bring in any revenue.
No, I know, but you said that you took 300,000 off of Public Works and added it to the expenditure of parks.
Right. The
And
difference
then-
between those two is 90 grand, right? Expenditure wise.
Yes, I was just thinking that the Public Works, or if the Parks Department, if it actually can generate some income, it breaks
Right.
even. If
Sure.
it pays for
But-
itself.
Right. I think we have to look at it a little different. In other words, expenditure, we're estimating 377,000 for Public Works, 391,000 for parks, but we're only bringing in 90 grand. Right.
Right. Right.
So, again, I personally think the 335 is what it is. Like I said, it does not include any computers. Okay. And also, maybe some of the ballots will pass. That would change the revenues a little bit here. I'm going to move on.
Did we receive ARPA funds for this year yet?
Yes, we did.
We
Yes.
haven't spent it.
Nope. 192,000. So ARPA funds.
Hold on, we did give some to the Mountaineer though, so we don't have the full 192,000.
Correct. It's 3,000 less.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me just go quickly because I can.
Sure.
So what we're
And-
budgeting-
Trustee
Go ahead.
Blakemore had her hand up, so I just wanted to call it and just make sure that Trustee Blakemore, you don't have a question. I know you put it back down. Just wanted to be mindful of that.
So what we're budgeting for the ARPA fund is 263,000 that we still have to spend. And that's an in and an out. So we're budgeting always, like I said, grant revenue. So we have the opportunity to spend it. Because if we don't do that, we can't spend it. So yes, we still have 263,000 left.
I want to just remind the Board of Trustees though, that you've already committed a large chunk of that to the grit removal.
That's
So
correct.
that's not what you have available to spend.
That is correct.
And the reminder that it's in and it's out. It's not adding to the deficit that we have.
That's
That's
correct.
that's a really key.
It is really a key with grants. Exactly. Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
so I,
Miranda, I thought we did the grit removal with the last batch of ARPA. I guess not.
We did,
Yes.
but we're not done paying for it, so it's going to carry into 2023.
Oh, I got you.
So
Great, thanks.
when we get to that fund, we had to carry over, and this is an estimate as of August because that's all I can do. We had not spent 137,000 yet, so we had to bring that forward when we were doing this. So
Rita, I was going to back up to the sales tax revenue,
yes,
and you're proposing a 3% increase over 2022.
right.
So I was just poking around, looking at the proposed budgets for other towns and cities, and Boulder is going with a 7.6% increase in revenue. Most of that due to an increase in sales and use tax. I wonder if you have any comparables for the 3% recommendation.
I do not. I'm going based upon basically really how we're trending this year, meaning, like I said, I may adjust that. And what we need to be careful, Karen, when you're saying 7.9 Boulder, so I get a lot of these emails, and what a lot of them are saying, we used to do this actually, it was practice to say I'm increasing it 7% over what was budgeted the year before. Okay. I'm going by actuals because I think that is just more accurate, right? So in other words, that is, so when you say 7.9% for Boulder,
It was 7.6% over the approved 2022.
so that would be different, right? So if we go with what's budgeted in 2022, that would be different than actuals.
Okay, so, well, and what's typically done? Do we typically use the actuals from the previous year as the?
That's what I did
but-
starting last year,
Mhm.
because I feel that that is more appropriate
Mhm.
to get better numbers. In other words, right now we know, right, we're trending just about the same, right, as we did last year. We are, if you remember, August financials actually show we're trending 12% higher than budgeted. So I don't like that. I'm not going to increase this by 12%.
Okay, so typically you use the previous year's approved budget amount for sales tax revenue for the current year,
No,
for the year
do
that we're
not.
working on. No.
Nope, I use actuals. So in other words, if we were to go
Okay.
back to the sales tax slide, Karen, that's where you see actual numbers that were received in 21. And again, so far we have received just about the same as we did at the same time last year. So that's where I'm getting my 3% from. I don't think, unless I get revenue and it's a bunch higher here in the next couple months, I definitely don't think I want to go higher than 3%.
No, I'm not proposing that you do. I just wanted to get some information about where that increase came from to feel
Right.
comfortable with the increase versus just using what we had in the previous year. But okay, thanks for answering that.
Sure. All right, I think I am ready to move to the community center. Next slide, please. And that's my favorite because we're operating in the black. Just quickly want to point out 21's figures, budgeted to increase our fund balance by 7,900. Actuals was an increase of 89,000. So that's wonderful. What we're budgeting for 23 is an increase of 83,000. What's changed for the community center, they no longer, if you look on the debt service, a couple lines above the change in net assets, this is the first year they no longer have that bond debt service, which therefore gives them a little bit more funds to, be able to spend. But as of right now, we are projecting $26,500 in capital expenditures. Like I said, leaves us with a possible increase of 83,000 for the community center. Next slide.
Before we go, Dawn, is that realistic for a capital expense? Just 26 grand?
Yes,
Okay.
I hope so.
And Tom, we will be talking more at the end of this presentation about each fund and the capital improvements.
Good.
And it'll show each line item what makes up these funds. So that might be the time too that, you might have more questions. Okay. The water fund. So starting off again, just for comparison reasons, this is another big one. Budgeted 71,000 increase to the fund balance. Ended up with an increase of 281,000. What we're proposing for 23 is a decrease of 69,000, and that is mainly do some capital improvements that we're proposing. Let's see, how much is it? Oh, there you are. Sorry. Should I start over, or did you guys catch all this? Okay. So 21 highlighted in green, budgeted 71,000. Actual that we brought in was 281,000. And what we're proposing for the 2023 budget is a decrease of 69,000. And That is also capital improvements are obviously 260,000, which, you know, again, we'll talk about. I mean, that's 150,000 for membrane filters, 55,000 for a fire hydrant replacement, and 55,000 for Big Springs pipeline freezing prevention. We'll talk about that more when we look at the slides. Here's what I want to do really quick. If you wouldn't mind, look under other sources of cash. There you'll see PIF fees. Okay. The way this works as far as our restricted funds go is whatever is budgeted, which was in 21, 74,020. We brought in $214,058 dollars. So the difference between what's budgeted and what's brought in, which in our case is 140,000, then gets put into this restricted funds to be used for infrastructure improvements. I do want to say though, in 2022 for PIF fees, we budgeted 210,000.
Yeah.
And as of August, we have only brought in 65,000. So it can also go the other way, which, you know, has happened in the past, but I'm just making the board aware that, you know, next year I may go the other way, but like I said, we have over $1 million now in that restricted fund to be used for infrastructure improvements.
PIF fees are predominantly come from construction, right? New home construction.
Yes, exactly right. And so also wanted just to point out, so yeah, let's talk about this. So Miranda and I, if you look at PIF fees, what we're budgeting for 2023, we're going way low at 107,000, because really PIF fees are so expensive now, right? And so we just felt that we needed to budget lower for 23, and that is actually part of why we're really seeing a change in assets in a decrease for the change in assets. I don't know if you want to expand on that, Miranda, but
yeah, I'm curious. Are we seeing drop off in plans being filed and things like that indicate we're going to slide?
Yeah, and you can see that in the planning and zoning budget too. We're just not seeing the building permits like we historically have. And my assumption would be that's just because the cost of building is significant, and so new builds are not occurring at the same rate they historically were.
Okay, Karen, your hand's up. But you're muted, I think.
Where can I see the restricted fund for that the PIF fees goes into?
So Karen, I was just showing, so we talked about the restricted fund at the beginning, that slide where I was showing how much is in the restricted fund for the water and sewer, how much funds there are. I was just pointing out how we come about these PIF fees, those restricted funds is the difference between what's budgeted in PIF fees and what we actually bring in. So in this case, it was an increase of 140,000 if you look at the PIF fees. Are you seeing those, Karen?
I see the PIF fees budget is 107,000.
But look at 2021. I was explaining.
2021 is.
Yes, ma'am. We budgeted 74,000. We brought in 214,058. The difference between the two is 140,000. That was added to the restricted funds in 2022.
Can we pull up the slide with the restricted funds? So. Oh, but where does it show up in the budget?
What do you mean? So what this is, Karen, this 307,000 and the 774, that's an accumulation over several years. This year, I added 140,000 to it. That now gives us a balance of 774.
So, okay. So I should see that in the fund balance for the water fund. Is that correct?
That's what it does. It increases the fund balance, correct. So in other words, look at 2021 actuals. We increased the fund balance by 281,000.
Okay.
Does that make
Tanya
sense?
has a question too.
Okay,
Oh,
sounds good.
oh, no, just, regarding the PIF fees, and then the new rates have gone into effect this year, Miranda, then?
Yes, and you ended up adopting a tiered rate system. So new rates went in this year,
Yeah.
and it'll increase slightly as we head into next year, and then again in 2024.
So it is an incentive right now for people to build, but I guess overall, just everything
I
costing.
think it's just so expensive.
Not just
really.
us.
Right, we're
Yeah.
just not seeing the building, and so yeah, I'm not sure. And the increase is really minor. So I don't think that's going to deter. I think ultimately what is deterring people is just generally the cost of building.
No, I mean, the increase is not, well, it's minor now, but it's gonna be not minor.
Well, it's minor from the major increase that happened last year, right? Because I think
Right.
it's just a couple $1,000s more.
Oh, I
But
got
yeah,
you.
the increase came from 2021, which is why you saw so many builds. Because I will tell you, people
Yep.
rushed through their permits at the end of 2021 in an effort to avoid the 2022 PIF rate.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll have to ask, if in the future, when we evaluate this in a few years, if maybe the higher rates are backfiring on us
Sure.
and we're not
Yeah.
actually generating the money we need for infrastructure.
But so back to, if you look at that, that's a decrease of 102,000 in PIF fees. That's obviously revenue that we're budgeting to not have. Therefore, you'll see, again, not too concerned about the 69,000 because, history has shown that, we seem to be doing okay and bring in more, but, again, cannot say for sure that that's going to happen. But I think the water fund has a strong enough fund balance to be able to support that.
So, right now in 2022, you budgeted 210 for PIF fees, but we've only gotten like 60,000 so far.
Yep,
Ish.
we're not great.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It happens. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go on to the sewer fund. Thank you. So starting off again with 21s, and I might as well talk about PIF fees again because it works the same way. This is another fund. We did budget a decrease of 36,000, but came out ahead, increase of 90,000. So if we quickly go up to the PIF fees, you'll see we budgeted 67,448 and actuals received was 125,030. So what I did is I added, how much was it? 115,000 to that restricted fund balance for the sewer. So again, that is, just important information, I think, for everybody to know. Let's see. So really, looking at the operating budget, if you look at that, operating revenue minus the expenditures, we are operating in the black at $85,612, if you look at that. But really, when you add in other sources of cash in the amount of $432,933, and other expenditures for the debt service and capital improvement, we end up in a decrease in fund balance of 115,000. I'm not too concerned about that, but that's up to the board to decide. I also believe, again, the sewer fund is a very healthy fund balance. Capital improvements are obviously pretty large, as they are almost every year, 247,000, and we can talk about that again later. Trying to think of what else. I think, was this the same, Miranda? Let's see. Yeah, so PIF fees, again, we cut that in half, we reduced that by 81,000. And that is really just such an estimate. It's hard to say, really, but we took, the same theory as we did over on the water fund. I think we were estimating 3 structures at 3/4 inch, right, Miranda?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So that's all I have to say for now for the sewer fund.
On the debt service, Rita, how much debt are we carrying, and what's our interest rate on that debt?
I think those are, if I remember right, those are 0. Let me look. I can pull that up. Let's see. Grant. So this is the sewer fund. Give me a second, okay?
Sure.
Sewer.
Yeah, it looks like like the debt service is dropping a bit as you would expect, but I was just curious as to how much we're carrying.
So let's see, as of August, we have, you want to know what's still outstanding or what?
Yeah,
Total? Okay.
Yeah.
So
and who we owe it to?
it's still quite a bunch, let me tell you.
Yeah,
Yep. Okay. This one here and total of 3.2 million still. So
Okay.
these, let's see, most of these, 2 of the loans will be paid off in 32, and then the last one will be paid off in 39.
And Rita, correct me if I'm wrong, this is for the biosolids building.
Yes.
okay.
Correct. Yep.
Did we, so we borrowed to put that up?
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct. Yes.
Rita, what criteria is used to decide if we use proprietary or non-proprietary funds for capital improvements for water and sewer infrastructure?
So obviously, if it's a, if it's a capital improvement that relates to sewer, it'll be put under the sewer fund. Same with water. If it has to do with your water, if it's a project that has to do with the water fund, then I will be putting it in that fund.
So we have proprietary funds.
So the proprietary
and
funds is
reserves
just the
and
sewer fund.
non-proprietary. So my question is, when do we use proprietary versus when we use non-proprietary?
I'm not sure I'm understanding your question.
Okay, so there was a slide
Right.
that showed.
So the only proprietary funds we have, and that's just a name, is the sewer fund and the water fund. They are treated like business type of entities. So those are our 2 proprietary funds. So when you're asking me when do we use proprietary funds is if it's related to sewer, which is a proprietary fund, then if the capital improvement is relating to the sewer fund, it'll be used in the sewer fund.
I think, Trustee Blakemore, to answer your question, I think you're going to use the proprietary funds when you're looking at expansion. I don't view those as funds you should be dipping into for operational costs. I mean, when we hit capacity at the wastewater treatment plant, those are going to be funds that are going to be needed. Of course, it's not going to fund a whole expansion, but it's going to be needed to offset any sort of loan or what else we might do to help with that expansion. They shouldn't be. Yeah, they shouldn't be used to like cover grit, right? Those should really be used for your expansion or large scale infrastructure needed to improve the facility operations.
I misunderstood you, Karen. You kept saying proprietary. What you're talking about is the reserves in the proprietary funds, right? That's probably what the restricted funds, right? When will those be used? So I misunderstood your question. I apologize.
I guess assuming I understood your question correctly, is that right, Trustee Blakemore?
That is correct.
Okay.
Miranda, thank you for that answer.
We were going to get there eventually.
Yeah, right. Okay. All right. Sewer fund. Let's see. Okay. I'm ready to go to street fund. So the street fund really obviously was created, to use on street repairs. We use, I think it's 0.25 of the 4% sales tax was used to create the street fund. The reason I'm mentioning that is if you look at, first of all, again, let's talk about the 21 situation, budgeted negative 6,200 and came out with $104,530. I do want to point out, we budgeted for total expenditures in 21, 128,500. They only used in 2021, 37,000, right? So in my opinion, this is a fund that was created to be used, right? Not to increase the fund balance. And as you can see, we have a very high fund balance, right? Even after, in 2022, the fund ending balance was 226,000. So what we did, because it shows a change in net assets of negative 145,000, right? Still leaving us with a fund ending balance of 80,000. What we did is, once we look at the line items, we are proposing 100,000 for asphalt and 100,000 for dust suppressant. The reason being, if we put it in the budget as an expenditure, we can use it, right? If we don't put it in there, we can't, right? Because street fund is a standalone fund. As far as DOLA is concerned, they will look at this. If we go over the budgeted expenditures, that's all we talk about with DOLA, that's when we'll get in trouble, right? We might be written up. So the 100,000 each for dust suppressant and asphalt, that is under equipment and supplies. So that is something for the board to decide if they want to do this. And then obviously the capital expenditures is a carryover from last year. That is for the electric vehicle that we were going to do in 2022, but that isn't happening. Right, Miranda?
Correct. We're very far on the list.
Yeah.
I don't remember, Emmett. Well, we're over 100 on the list of people eligible to get the Ford Lightning.
Yes, that's correct. We're pretty far down the list.
So we did, just for clarification, we did budget for next year. We could stay really far down on the list, but we want to have the funds available in case our number is called. We'd like to, of course, be able to continue with purchasing that truck.
And do we have the flexibility, like if we carve it out and we say, hey, it's budgeted for this, but if something comes out, can we change what those funds are used for?
Yeah, we actually did that this year. We would, under the supplemental budget, had mentioned that we'd like to use some of the funds for this year to be able to purchase another plow truck. And so, correct me, right, Emmett? And so, yes, we would be able to do the same thing if towards the end of the year, it's just looking like our number's not going to be called.
Yes, that's correct, Miranda.
Okay, thanks.
I just saw a hand pop up in a comment. Where did that go? Was that not for us?
It's in the chat, and I think it's someone with connectivity.
I'm not seeing that anymore.
Oh, it would be hard for me to show, and it's from a community member.
Oh, okay.
I would ask that the chat not be used just because we don't have a means to really monitor it. And I don't know, Tom, if you're looking to ask for public comment during this, it is a work session and that's your choice.
How much time? Okay, so how are we doing against our time budget so far?
We still have lots to go. So.
Okay.
Oh, he said just ignore him. So.
I have a question about the street fund.
Yes.
The email that we received today from the Boulder County Housing Association talking about the water flowing into their parking lot and that some sort of work would have to be done at the top of 3rd Street to help prevent that. I don't know if anybody read that, but that would be something that would come out of the street fund or just out of the general budget?
So it could come out of the streets fund. Currently, we don't have it in here. That's obviously, we encourage them to send that letter to you for you to assess. But the recommendation would be, if you're going to financially prioritize that, put it in the streets fund and not in the general fund, because the streets fund can carry that. To Rita's point, the streets fund has the means to carry some of those expenses, but you'd probably have to reassess maybe the way equipment and supplies are currently budgeted.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. Next slide, please. So the Conservation Trust Fund is very regulated. These funds have to be used for parks and trails improvements and maintenance. We did increase the 2023 expenditures to include unused fund balance from 2022. So, you know, that's another one. Obviously, it's very regulated, and I want to give, you know, Nikki or whoever the opportunity to spend these funds, right? If we don't budget for it, they can't spend it. So we did budget in 2022, as you can see, $29,000, which I believe they're going to try to use. We get approximately 16,000 per quarter, 4,000 per quarter, total of 16,000, sometimes a little bit more. It was 18,000 back in 2021. Really pretty simple as far as, you know, the way this fund looks. Again, I'm budgeting 27,000, which would leave a fund balance of 385 if they use all the funds in from 2022.
And I just want to offer a clarification here. You'll see under the parks, the new parks budget, we really don't have a line item for trails and sidewalk maintenance. And the reason for that is, again, this fund can carry that. And so we'd like to see that Nikki be able to use Conservation Trust Fund money for her sidewalk and trails maintenance needs versus adding it to the general fund and just making that fund, creating a larger deficit in that fund.
There's no reason not to do it that way, is there?
No, there is no reason. I would agree.
I mean,
Okay.
We agree, and that's why we want to do it this way. And this would allow, so normally these funds kind of are held by ProSab. So our intention, if the Board of Trustees supports this, is to explain to ProSab that these funds need to be then made available for Nikki to use as she sees fit for parks and trails improvements and maintenance.
and really, again, since it's so regulated, you know, we don't really have any other option here, you know, other than using it
You're
for
right.
parks and trails. So
I guess I'd like to get input from ProSab about that recommendation.
Yep. So the intention was to bring it before their board next week when they meet. Just to, so because Nikki, and Nikki, if you want to chime in, Nikki plans to ask for what is currently budgeted for 2022. And as a part of that discussion, we'd like to make the ask for what she needs for this year and then speak to kind of opening up those funds for her use next year. But Nikki, do you want to get into what you're planning to do this year?
So we have two major things that need to happen. They absolutely need to happen. And one of those is a new sidewalk tractor for plowing and trying to upgrade to something that we can utilize in the wintertime for plowing sidewalks and then use it in the summertime to maintain trails. So we're looking at that piece of equipment. We're bringing a couple of different examples that we can show ProSab to the board meeting on the 20th. And then the other thing is whatever I don't have in the GoCo grant monies for the amending the soil and hydroseeding down at Gercio. That project is going to be done by the end of October. So I'm coming to them on the 20th to ask if I can have my money so we can spend it and keep our employees safe and happy.
is 29,000 enough for that? For what you're asking?
Nope.
Oh,
Nope, but I'm gonna make it enough.
I just want to make sure we cannot spend more than that, okay?
I'm aware.
know that.
So we're utilizing part of our landscaping budget from the GoCo and we're only gonna be spending a small amount to amend and hydroseed at Gercio. The trail equipment for that piece of equipment is gonna be, you know, I mean, we could spend 60,000 on it, but we're looking at equipment that's going to be a little bit cheaper, possibly a year old, so that we can get it a little cheaper. That's how we're gonna make it enough.
Nikki, that Gershio field was hydroseeded in the last couple of years. And
Nope.
so will you be,
No,
if not,
No.
oh, it was just seeded.
it was
Okay.
just seeded with grass seed.
Okay, great. Are you gonna rototill in the, and then, I'm just asking because it didn't work last time. And I've
Nope.
done hydro seed in a big property in Boulder. That did work, but we had to rototill.
Okay, so the reason that it didn't work was because the grass seed mix that we put down was just a seed mix, and it really requires irrigation and or a very wet summer to grow. The other problem that we have down at Gercio is that our soil has no nutrient in it. And in order to get that soil to grow anything other than a weed, we need to amend the soil by adding certain treatments to the soil. It's all a very environmentally friendly process. So a company comes in and puts the material that would amend the soil down, and then they come in and the same company will come in and actually hydroseed That hydro seed will sit and soak over the course of the winter. And if we have to do it in spring, we'll do it in spring, and then it would sit and soak through the late winter snows, late early spring snows, however you want to put it. And it would soak and have that chance to kind of soak in and grow. The seed mix that we're using for Gersio to hydro seed it is a native grass and wildflower blend that grows really well in dry conditions. So we also do have irrigation around the boundary of Gersio Field to water our plants and trees and things like that. If needed, we could hook sprinkler heads in and actually hit most of the Gersio Field. That's something that I'm trying to avoid doing because of water conservation and just trying to be as sustainable as possible down there. So that's what's up with that.
Will it be mowed then or?
No, it's a very low lying grass. So the grass itself would never grow really more than a couple few inches tall. Then the wildflowers are also very short. You can see an example of it if you ever drive over to the South Beaver area where there's Lincoln Hills. They used the same product on their hillsides and berms over there, and it just is absolutely gorgeous. And they don't do any maintenance or watering to their hillsides and berms over there.
How will that hold up with, people playing on the field, playing ball games and
It'll be
pitching them?
It'll be great. I mean, with soccer, they could have soccer, we could have camps, whatever kind of event anyone can envision on a field that size. We are working right now to try and get the performance space kind of fired up and happening again. We'll see how how long that takes, but this mix should actually it's made for wear and tear. It's made to be native and natural and to be used. So I'm looking very forward to it. I've seen it in use up here at this elevation, and it's, like I said, it's beautiful and easy to maintain. And the company that's hydro seeding and doing this work for us I actually went to high school with the guys, their family. Harvey McCullum put in many of our water lines. They're very familiar with our area. So I have no reservations about the company that we're hiring or the product.
Let's move along. We got a lot of ground to cover.
Thank you.
Okay, next slide, Miranda. So the Health and Human Services Fund, I kept that the same as last year. And just for those who have not heard how this works, we have occupation tax revenue that comes into the general fund. And then as of last year's decision by the board, it's split 99% then gets transferred over to the Health and Human Services Fund, and 1% is allocated for police services. And, Miranda, they'll probably have another meeting on that this year to decide if they want to keep the percentage the same. So anyway, what I did, I kept it the same as last year. So therefore, you're seeing a transfer from the general fund of $34,650. And obviously, I'm putting that right back out to be spent as a Health and Human Services Fund. Really, nothing more to say about this fund.
I'm sorry, I do have a question. So
Yes.
did we make $10,000 off it or $34,000 off the fund?
So, so see the 10,000 in line of 2022 budget. Remember, we did a revised budget because we had set up that funding correctly.
Right.
So the 10,000, that was corrected. In other words, I do have a note. Yes, as of August's financials, we have brought in almost $16,000 so far in revenue. So I feel it's pretty safe to leave that at $34,650. But again, until we know more. But regardless, it's an in and an out. So I feel okay with that.
Oh, you're saying we haven't spent any of it?
In 2022, we have had requests. We have not spent any of the 2022 yet, right? Correct, Miranda? That's in the works.
Well, but I want to offer a clarification that the 99% of this fund goes to that board that's set up under the Peak to Peak Housing and Human Services and Food Pantry. And they're the ones who spend those funds and then provide us with a report of how they spent them. That was kind
Oh,
of the
I got
agreement.
you.
So town doesn't have any involvement in how those
Right.
funds are distributed.
And how often do we receive the tax revenue from the lodging owners?
Quarterly.
Quarterly. Are we using post compliance, Miranda?
Yes.
We are. And do they give us a report on the on how much occupation tax we should be expecting from each of the Airbnb properties?
No, Macy has to manually calculate that out. There's really no way to run that type of report. And again, we're able to operate off of what we feel is an estimate of what should be paid, because host compliance cannot provide specific details about the way in which a property is rented. They can provide us with the data about how often it's rented, minimum night stays. And so we're able to calculate based on that kind of data on what we should be anticipating from an STR owner, but it is truly a self-reported tax.
Oh, we don't, okay, so if we see a discrepancy, do we contact the property owner?
Yes, and I've only seen a discrepancy once in my time. Macy, have you had any discrepancies since you've been doing it?
So I've seen what I thought was discrepancies, but upon reaching out, it has come to be that the home was being rented long-term, and so they didn't actually owe taxes for like what I was seeing. So it wasn't an actual discrepancy. No.
Yeah, generally I would say what we receive is above what we believe. So what we're able to determine is the estimate of what we should, bare minimum, what we should be receiving, and we typically receive above that.
Thanks.
Okay, next slide. And I guess, is Kate here or no?
She is.
Okay, Kate, did you want to talk about this or you want me to?
No, you can go ahead and I'll just jump in with
Okay,
any
you can just
questions.
correct me, okay?
No, you're doing wonderful.
So the DDA's operating budget is similar to last year. And so if you look at the capital improvements, it looks like a lot. Reality though is when you look at the 2021 budgeted amount of 480,848, the actual amount spent was just 72,171,000. So really, also, if you look at change in net assets, it was budgeted at a decrease of 218,000, but the fact is it was an increase of 354,000. And of course, that has a lot to do, you know, they budgeted for $480,000 worth of projects, but not as many were done. That's changing in 2022. They're doing a lot more of that. So anyway, so this is also again for maybe some of the newer board members. So for 2022, they're budgeting $380,000 in capital projects. Again, there's a separate slide that explains all what they're wanting to spend that money on. But here it is. Here's the thing. Just because you might approve the budget, right, as it is for the DDA, the process hasn't changed. They would still come before you with any TIF projects and present it as an informational item and explain to you what they are hoping to accomplish with those TIF funds. Next, they would then bring a resolution to you and you would then approve it. So that has not changed. So really, again, you know, like I said, their operating budget is pretty similar to last year. Not much has changed. They are predicting or planning on spending $380,000 worth on projects this year. That is really all I have to say about the budget, until we get, you might have more questions when you look at the different projects that they are thinking of doing in 2023.
One question on non-TIF funding. What is intergovernmental? There was just is 166 back in
I'm
2020.
sorry,
What is
where's
it?
that at? Intergovernmental.
Under governmental. What
That
does
is,
that mean?
some of those are grants funds that come in, grants.
Okay.
Yes. So, oh, just one more thing, go back to it really quick. So really what they're, if, this gets approved, they're projecting to have a decrease in their fund balance by 34,000. And really, even though you're seeing, this is kind of a funky way of the way this was set up, in my opinion. You're seeing the non-TIF and TIF funds separated right on this slide. But when you do the financial statements, and also if you look at the audit, the auditor combines these two really. So if you look at the fund ending balance under the non-TIF, it shows a negative 116,815. What you really need to do here is combine that with the fund ending balance under TIF, which is 1,040,000. So that is really what needs to be done here.
If the auditor is already doing it, is there any reason we continue to do it this way?
My opinion is, Tom, if you see how over several years now, you see how there's figures, right?
Sure.
In each line item, right? And so I think changing it would just cause a big problem with all these different line items, because they're always going to be there, right?
Right.
So I think if we can just explain it the way I just did, really, we need to look at it as a whole. But it is kind of nice, of course, to see we're budgeting, TIF revenue at 350,000. That's a little bit separate, right? And really, that's the big one, right? In the TIF account. And then really the property taxes under the non-TIF funding is what funds the operating budget. And just because it is so different, it's funny, under the non-TIF, you see the 380,000 loan proceeds, meaning money coming in, right? They borrow most of the time. They have been doing that from town. You see it going back out under capital. And then really under TIF, under the TIF is where you see the debt service. And actually that includes the 380,450 includes, it's $50 maximum of interest that they pay per project when they go through town.
Okay.
Interest. So.
Kate, a couple of questions. How much longer does the charter run, and how are we doing for 2023 projects, since the whole purpose is projects for DDA?
We have 7 years left of this TIF, and then it could be voted on again. So it doesn't have to end at that time. And with regard to your question about the projects, so the board has suggested projects that they would like to see. That's what got us to that number. So do you want me to go over the projects that would you like a list of the projects that they are thinking?
Yeah, just a high level walkthrough. I'm curious as to what you got in mind for next year.
So we have that. Sorry, super quick, Kate. We actually have that listed in CIP. I don't know if you want to do it now, Tom.
Okay.
We have it all.
There it is.
Okay, we're good. That's all I needed.
I will say, most of these are actually continuations of projects that we've been working on. So not carrying over necessarily, but more the next phase. So like beautification, that's something that we do annually. Wayfinding has been something we've been working on the last few years. The Ned Fire Protection IGA is something we regularly do. The only things that are kind of new for this year that we're starting to embark on is carving out some money to do some due diligence for the performance space and the river walk, and also to help with covered bridge costs. We've got that in for capital improvement projects potentially for next year, as well as the match for the Dr. Cog grant. So those are really the newer things that we're doing. Everything else are continuations of projects we've done in the past. So thank you for your question.
150 is the biggest chunk in here. What are we doing for wayfinding that costs $150,000?
the production of the signs. So this is actually this is not the planning phase anymore. Now it's about actually getting the signs put up and around town.
Good, okay.
Kate, could you elaborate on the Riverwalk work that is in your capital improvement priorities?
So there's not a lot to elaborate on. It's just that has been something that's come up in a lot of meetings, that across board meetings and that. And so the board was just trying to be responsive and carve out money so that if that conversation continues to evolve and there's a way that the DDA could play a role, that money is already kind of in our budget. And then, like Rita said, we would come to the Board of Trustees and say, hey, here's our plan. You know, this is what we've come up with. This is how we've talked to people and get everybody's input, and then move it forward that way. But really, this was just more, what are the things that we're talking about, like performance space, you know, what are the things that people are talking about in town, and where can the DDA be effective, and then kind of to anticipate some of those needs in the first year. So they're kind of just round numbers. It's not necessarily indicative of something specific. It's just more guessing kind of what potentially paying for some planning documents, you know, about floodplains and et cetera, things like that. That's really what the DDA's conversation was about, those items.
And the Riverwalk is on the north side of Middle Boulder Creek in the Central Business District?
Yes.
Is that, okay. And now the traffic and safety support, my understanding is that is new in 2022, is that right?
Yes, that was new in 2022, and that's been pretty successful. That's why we upped the amount for this year, that people have utilized our funding for events in town, because those funds are meant to be, generally what happened is that people would come to us when they were having a special event and they would ask for event support funding as well as traffic and safety, with the costs of getting rangers, et cetera, up here, and that, so that we could help with some of those costs. And so that's been a successful fund. We've almost expended all of the money that we set aside for 2022, which I believe was 20,000.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I think you're up, Miranda.
My turn. All right, so I'm going to do a brief overview of CIP projects for each of the departments, but obviously I have representatives of each department here to elaborate if you'd like. So let me just start with the police department. We have Motorola body cameras as well as tasers that have a monthly contract, at least the body worn cameras do. And so we're going to need to continue to pay on those. So for body worn cameras, tasers, and the evidence system, it's $15,884, and $5,884 of that is carrying over. We currently have a vehicle that we have a 5-year lease on that we would need to pay, which is that $10,000 line. And then we do need new vehicles. I think that's been a part of the conversation with police department. So we are estimating for another 5-year lease on a new vehicle at $14,000. Just ask questions as I go. Yeah, please.
I do want to add to that. If you're looking at the capital improvement plan, what also is included, in the capital and the general fund, what is also included is $60,000 that I had mentioned before. That's the estimate of the whole vehicle, 60 grand. And per the auditor, it's got to go in. So it's a revenue and an expenditure. It's an in and an out, 60,000 just to get it on the books. And then of that, the 14,000 is my estimate, on a 5-year lease, which includes interest as well.
Thanks, Rita.
Thank you.
For the Public Works Streets Department, this is in the general fund. There is currently a payment on a plow dump truck, so it's at $31,000. For those of you who have not had the pleasure of going to the Public Works shop in the winter, it is freezing cold. They have heaters to try and warm the building, but it is like bundled up parka freezing cold. And so when talking with JVA, we'd like to try kind of a fix that we believe could work for a total of $12,500 that would be split in half, where $6,250 would go to streets and the other half would go to parks. And this is to try the first recommendation from JVA to see if we can get the heat to work in this building. If that doesn't work, option number 3 is a $25,000 the fix that we could come back to you with in a supplemental budget if we're not able to make the repair that's needed. But this team is operating in freezing conditions, and so I think this is essential to work on getting them heat at that public workshop.
What's the issue? Is it a furnace that's not functioning?
Nikki or Emmett, could either one of you speak to that?
Yeah, it's they put in in-floor heating and didn't compensate for our groundwater temperatures, and then they had other issues, and the heat has never really ever worked in this building. So we do run space heaters in the upstairs trying to keep our offices a little bit warm, but yeah, the downstairs it doesn't work. And there's a problem with our exhaust fan sucking any kind of a heat that we do have in the building and just blowing it straight out of the building. So any kind of heat that does generate in here, it gets blown straight out if you leave the bathroom light on. So very much hopeful.
What are the solutions? What's the first 25 grand attempt and the second 25 by?
It's the first attempt is so the total for the first attempt is 12,500 that we would split in half.
Okay.
And I can send, I don't have the email right in front of me, but I'm happy to send the Board of Trustees what JVA is recommending as the step 1, 2, 3. So we're recommending doing step 1 and 2 right now. Here, maybe I've got it pulled up. So step 1 is kind of a building automation system, and then step 2 is a rebalancing as needed based on the results they get from step 1. I won't read all this, but I can send it to the Board of Trustees, the recommendation.
But it's not a system replacement. You're going to keep trying to use that in-floor heat, the radiant heating.
Yep. And so then if it doesn't work, then there's kind of a final option is to upgrade the buffer tank. And that's where we look at roughly 15 to 25,000. Again, that was based on February of this year. Prices have gone up. So we'd like to try 1 and 2 first, see what happens. And then if needed, switch to option number 3.
Well,
Miranda, that's a pretty new building. There's no options for any kind of warranties or anything on that.
No, I mean, Nikki, I think you can speak to this again better than I can.
Yeah, unfortunately, the warranties expired a couple of years ago, and Chris had already signed off on it. So no, there's no warranty option at this point.
Are we pouring good money after bad to make radiant heating an unsuitable system work as opposed to putting in a furnace and ducting and things that we know do work?
We're trying to to be sustainable too. Go ahead, Emmett.
Yeah, that's my train of thought also. It's geothermal heat, and I'm just not confident that it was designed properly to heat the building with the temperatures that we experience. So I'm curious as well whether or not it's sufficient.
I hate to see money go down a rat hole when money is so tight. We've got a solution that might work. I trust JVA, but I've seen so many systems like this fail and fail and fail and never work right. And I would just hate to be at the end of a $45,000 exercise and have nothing.
So my recommendation would be I'll send you this email. Take a look at this email and see what Kevin Tone's recommendations are. And we can always have him kind of elaborate more for the Board of Trustees. I think one of the challenges you're going to have, and the challenge for this budget altogether, is financial priorities, right? This is coming out of your general fund. And so the more, I agree, I want the team to have heat. I think it's just being mindful that you are then adding to that negative balance by pursuing something different. And so if you could consider this original kind of step 1, 2, see what happens, or we ask Kevin to revisit just a more long-term permanent solution versus kind of trying to fix what's there. But I'm going to send this to you right now so you can see.
Did he give you any percentage of likelihood that it will work?
He did not in this email give us percentage of likelihood. He just offered a phased approach on how to
I
fix
read,
it.
yeah, I don't know what, I don't want to deliberate this tonight, but I would ask that you go back and revisit this because it just doesn't smell right to me.
Sure.
We need a guarantee that it's going to work if we're going to spend that money too.
Yeah, I'm happy to
That's what
revisit that
engineers do.
with JVA
Mhm.
and see where they stand on that.
Okay, let's move on.
Great. And so moving on to parks. So let me just kind of explain how the vehicles work. There are 7 vehicles within Public Works itself. 3
Mhm.
are at utilities because those 3 team members rarely work together. 2 sit with parks and 2 sit with streets. But technically parks only has 1 truck because their truck went down. Their parks truck is no longer operable. So we are looking for $20,000 to be able to purchase a truck for parks so that they can return back to having 2 trucks to complete their work.
So $20,000 for a truck is obviously a used truck.
Yes.
Is that realistic?
For a used truck, I think I could get something pretty nice for us. The truck that we had been using for the last 6 years or so, we actually bought at auction for $1,500, and it lasted a while. But even if that truck hadn't just completely died on us, I would be asking for some money for a new truck because that truck was a 2-seater.
Mhm.
And in a perfect world, there are 4 of us.
Yeah.
Typical work day, I use my own car and the guys have the truck, and we take somebody one place, drop him off, and maybe have the golf cart, and then transport somebody else to another spot, or maybe 2 people work together and I roll around in my own car. So,
Well, at least they have heat.
amen. Well
Or they
said,
can
Tom.
get warm in the vehicles.
Thank you for seeing the bright side.
Yeah.
Miranda, I understand that we have a lot of old vehicles up at the public workshop. Are we planning to sell those, get rid of them in 2023 and 2022? And is that in the budget as far as the revenue that we would receive?
It is in the budget for streets and parks. Streets and parks have both identified vehicles that could be sold. Didn't get into that for police department, but that is something we could assess with Troy. But yeah, both Nikki and Emmett plan to sell vehicles.
Yeah, I in particular, I heard about the police cars, so I think that would be good to
Sure.
look into with Troy.
Okay. Okay, so grants. We were awarded the FEMA Big Springs Egress Grant. Total match for us is a just shy of 175,000. That grant will take us over 36 months. So we are recommending breaking that up because we're obviously not going to spend the full 175 this year. Or excuse me, next year. So we are recommending budgeting 60,000 for that. And actually, after talking with Trustee Blakemore, would like to take the same approach with the Dr. Cog. And I'm sorry, this should be the multimodal transportation plan. And splitting that 15,000 to be 7,500, since it takes 4 to 6 months to have a contract in place, meaning we won't be able to do much work until the end of 2024. So we'd like to take that and split it. And so we'll make that adjustment.
While we're on the topic of the FEMA grant, I recall looking at that, there was fees paid to town staff and to JVA as part of the grant amount that we receive. And so I'm wondering if we should be counting that as revenue in our general fund. Maybe taking the total amount that we expect to receive over the 3 years and putting 1/3 of that into 2023.
So I did put in, I think it's like 574,000, give or take, in as a revenue and an expenditure in the general fund. I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about.
Well, I'm talking about not counting it as an expenditure because
It,
It is.
you know, again, that really doesn't matter as far as the bottom line is concerned. As Nicole mentioned earlier, the change in fund balance will not change. So, I mean, we've not done that in the past. I would recommend put in the full amount we were awarded, and then like we were doing with some of the other, like ARPA funds, other grants, what we don't use, right, we will then carry forward into the 2024 budget. But, you know, whatever the board decides here, you know, I don't see the difference between putting the full amount of the grant in as a budgeted item versus the reduced amount.
Well, see, I think this may be the first time that this particular case is occurring.
That
Where-
So Rita, it's where, so in the budget we had where the grant would offset the administrative costs of town staff time spent on the grant. So in essence, we would bill for, when we do a request for reimbursement, we would indicate how much time town staff spent at our hourly rate. And that would be then, you know, covering town staff time. I think that's what Trustee Blakemore is trying to say, is that that comes back to town as revenue to cover town expenses.
And
I will
Also-
need to talk with you separately on that. I'm not quite
Yeah.
following what that all means, so.
Also, there's the Nederland EcoPass administrative fee. I think we settled on 15,000 for 2022 and tentatively
I think it's less.
15,000 for 2023. Is that in the budget as revenue? And
It
Yes,
is.
where,
Yep, so EcoPass admin, we're budgeting at 10,000 for revenue for 2023. That is correct.
okay, so I'll see that on the detailed
Yes,
line items. Okay. All right.
And we'll follow back up on that grant piece, Trustee Blakemore.
Yeah, I think it would be worthwhile doing because it is revenue that we'll be receiving and we won't be spending it. So, or you can think of it like we will be submitting a bill to FEMA or whoever's administering the grant for the hours that the town staff and JVA work on it.
and you're saying that is excluding the to the 574 or whatever we're budgeting for that grant, right?
No, it's all included. I think we should probably take this one offline. I'm not sure
Okay,
it's worth
I
tying
agree.
up this time.
I
so
agree.
We'll come back.
I agree. Good idea.
Okay, community center. I would like to just invite Dawn if you're still. Yep, Dawn. Do you want to speak to your capital improvement projects here really quickly?
Yeah. So my capital improvement, so lighting, that should actually read lighting in the community room and the gym. We've had that on there for a couple of years, but obviously that didn't happen in 2020 or 21 due to complete and partial shutdowns. So that's something that we're planning to do. We've got the estimates from the electrician and we're replacing those with current technology high base versus old fluorescents. So that will also meet our sustainability goals. The mechanized shades in the MPR, I would like to address that. You've all been in the community room for meetings, and there's that gorgeous quilt that represents thousands of hours of work on the wall. And the sun comes in there and is just absolutely destroying it. It was a gift from the school to us. It was made, there's a whole history of it with the legend there that you can look up yourselves. But the other reason for those mechanized shades, it has to be mechanized. It's the south-facing windows, and it's this time of year during the equinoxes, and also, around February, March. You can't have midday meetings in there. The sun comes straight in, hits you in the eyes. People are scooting their chairs around. It kind of looks like musical chairs. It's pretty funny, actually. If we ever get back to full in-person meetings during the days. And also senior lunch. So there's a lot of reasons for that. So we could move the quilt, but there would be no other place to put it. It would just have to be stored. The ways to protect that quilt are very, very expensive if you go to quilting museums. We've looked into that as well. Kitchen ventilation work may or may not need to be done, but we are hoping to do some upgrades in there. So that's what that was for. And happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Don.
What do we do in there during the day? We have some daytime meetings plus court is done in there too, right?
Yes. So Peak to Peak Human Services Alliance, the Intermountain Alliance, those are once a month meetings. There used to be quite a few meetings, workshops, people renting during the day. And we've been steadily seeing a return of those activities. It's not full volume yet, back to, pre-COVID levels.
Right.
But we are anticipating that if the trend continues, obviously virtual meetings have changed the landscape, but there's a lot to be said for getting together in person, especially with those kinds of meetings where they're typically not where a board sits in front and chairs are facing the board. They're usually round table sort of meetings, with up to, 30 to 40 people at them. So where we sit in a circle and, in a big square of tables and, share. So, yeah.
Have we already shopped these? Are we pretty confident $7,500 would solve it?
Pretty confident. I think, well, that's an old estimate. I think that's probably from 2018. But I think that's a good estimate, because if it's more than that, we'd be able to find that money in our budget, out of our revenue to meet any deficit on that.
Okay, let's leave it in there. It may work, it may suffice, it may not, but we have to start somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's a good round number.
Okay. The electric vehicle, let's talk about that.
So I already kind of mentioned that. So obviously we're really low on this. I think above 100 on the list of who will get the Ford Lightning. And so we'd like to just have the funds available when our number is called to be able to purchase that. And that truck is currently set to go to streets, which would be appropriate given that the Shelby Silverados they're driving are just will eventually need to be phased out.
What is the truck used for?
This is used for streets day-to-day operations, getting the team to and from. I don't know, Emmett, what else you want to, I can't speak to your truck usage, but if Emmett's still there. It's their day-to-day vehicle. So they too are a team of 3, and we're budgeting for them to be a team of 4 so that they fall in line with every other public works department to be a team of 4.
Okay. And we're going to buy it outright or lease it?
I'm not the expert on the EV vehicle, so I cannot comment. This is something that Chris Pelletier had started. I think the thought was to buy it outright and to ideally use a series of grant funding that's available for EV vehicles to be able to finalize the purchase.
Okay.
Miranda, would streets need a new truck? Even if we didn't purchase the electric vehicle?
Yeah, I would say the Chevy.
Is a new vehicle needed for streets?
So I think they can get along with the Chevy Silverado. I think, yes, across the board, new trucks are needed. But Emmett,
I think I'm cutting out.
Oh, no. Emmett, are you there? I think we may have lost Emmett. Yes, I mean, generally, I would argue utilities typically has the financial means to buy the newer trucks, and so they have a lot of the 2019 Ford F-150s. Nikki, we were able to move one of those F-150s over to the Parks Department, but again, that is Nikki's one and only truck. And then Emmett has Chevy Silverados, which I don't know if Nikki's there too. She had to step away, but those are like 2014. Oh, Emmett, you're there. 2014, 2015, I think. They're pretty old.
2011.
2011. Thank you.
Okay. I get it.
I'm just started reading the letter from Boulder County Housing Authority about the problem with Third Street drainage and their solution. And looking at that, I think I would recommend putting money towards that rather than an electric vehicle, if it's just to have an electric vehicle. You know, if we need new vehicles, additional vehicles for streets fund, I would support that, but not like an additional cost for an electric one. I'd rather see that going into that money spent on some of the street work that we need to have done.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that this is a vehicle just to have a vehicle. Like the Chevy Silverados are put to use, and they're obviously 11 years old, and streets vehicles and parks vehicles, or any public works, are going to take a pretty hard beating given the work that they do. And so, Emmett, I don't know how much longer you think those Silverados have, but I'm guessing not too much longer given their use.
Yeah, I would agree that they're at the end of their life at this point. And yeah, I'm not committed to an electric vehicle, but I do think that either way, one of our vehicles needs to be replaced, and it would be money well spent.
So, and I do want to speak to, you know, the where this electric vehicle really came from is Chris Pelletier had done a study of the usage of the streets vehicles to see what might be the appropriate EV for them, and ultimately that Ford Lightning came out of it. I do think we need to be mindful, though, of the sustainability goals here, and that currently town is involved in an Excel EV fleet program. And so, you know, I guess again, something for the board to consider is how does this then fall within those larger sustainability goals of you know, maybe aiming to convert our whole fleet at some point to EV. All right. Sorry.
Personally, I'd put the road work as a higher priority than vehicle electrification, fleet electrification. But I'm just one person out of 7.
I do want to mention though, and I'm sure you know this, but that 40,000 is part of the budget, you know, the streets budget. That is, you know, that was calculated. So, and
Yep.
obviously including the 100,000 each for the asphalt and the dust suppressant, just for clarification.
So I'm going to call on, I have Andrew Bliss and Chris Caligaris are both here, and they can speak to these things much better than I can. And so maybe just Chris and Andrew, if you could together do a quick review of sewer and water CIPs. I don't know, Chris, if you want to talk about the pumping out of the ISAMs and the EQ to get us started.
Yeah, sure. So at the wastewater plant, we have a problem of buildup in the ISAMs. Basically, it's because the grit removal system wasn't in place at the beginning of its design. So in my opinion, this is a crucial part of the operation that is the biggest stick in the gear, in my opinion. It creates a real septic condition for our biology, and we can't treat our water as well as we can. So the first one on the list there is to pump these ISAMs out and kind of reverse the damage of not having grit removal. They are full of grit and grease, and we can mitigate this cost by pumping it down and sending it to the digester the day that we pump out. So we can mitigate how much it's going to cost to repair this part of the operation. But in my opinion, it's crucial to us getting better treatment. So that's kind of a beginning start off. Andrew, you want to take off jetting and sewering?
Sure, happy to. So it's a best practice to clean and inspect your sewer collection system regularly. Our master infrastructure plan calls for cleaning and inspecting 1/5 of our sewer system every year. We've fallen a little behind on that, and so we're proposing attempting to clean and inspect our entire sewer system this year into next year at a little bit of a higher cost, but we're a little behind, so we need to get it done, and that will help us, one, clean out sewer lines to prevent sewer blockages, but also help us do a condition assessment of our sewer system, and to proactively identify necessary repairs in the sewer system. Can go into that alternative analysis for tertiary filters as well, unless you want to do that, Chris.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So JVA came in and we talked about our basically replacing our secondary filter system, which we currently use a sand filter system. And so we'd like to explore different possibilities of tertiary filtration, which would eliminate our phosphorus discharge, that we have a relationship with Boulder to keep our phosphorus at a lower level and clean the water just a little bit more. So a tertiary filter would bring our current levels down quite a bit, from maybe a 1.4 down to a 0.1 in removal. So we just need to do some analysis to see if that system would work with our footprint and with our load. So that's basically tertiary filters.
Thanks, Chris. I'll take the next two and then I'll pass it off back to you, Chris, to do membranes. So as we talked about when Trustee Corvalon had asked, we have the grit removal. So that's the estimated carryover to finish the grit removal system. We're still waiting for pieces to arrive so we can install, and that's set to come beginning of 2023. And ultimately, we should always just prepare to budget for I&I repairs. Oftentimes we're seeing pumps fail, breaks happen at the sewer plant, at the wastewater treatment plant. And so having that $20,000 to be able to quickly replace the pumps or buy the sand, or when we had headworks and we had to replace the basket, those are important things under I&I repairs. So we would like just that as a line item so that this team can make the necessary adjustments and make the purchases they need to ensure the wastewater treatment plant continues to run effectively.
What is I&I?
Inflow and infiltration, right, team? Make sure I got that right.
Okay, so yeah, I remember talking about or hearing previous boards talk about this, that the infiltration was actually impacting our capacity, right? Or artificially deflating it. Accurate?
Yeah, that's correct. So infiltration is water that comes from the ground into the sewer system, and inflow is water that comes from the surface into your sewer system. So if you get I&I, it means you're treating water that doesn't really need to be treated. So it's best to try to prevent that from getting into your sewer system and then paying to have it treated.
Yeah, and that's also a way we get a lot of grit in our system that we have to remove.
So with the I&I, with the camera, would that help identify I&I repair needs?
Definitely.
Yes.
Is there any other way to identify if there's I&I happening besides just the camera?
Flows. We can observe flows from different points, upstream and downstream.
And then can you tell us what ISAM and EQ is?
Yeah, so the ISAMs are the first part of our system, where headworks is the very beginning, and then after that it flows into our SBR system, which is a sequence batch reactor, where we batch out clear effluent. And so the ISAMs are basically a chamber that we can send our activated sludge to and from the SBR system, and also over to our digester. And so it's kind of the middle component of the whole plant. There's two large basins, 26 feet deep, that contain the sludge. And the EQ is the middle of our two SBRs, where the clear effluent is decanted into. So that's the basin right before it's ejected out of the wastewater plant into the reservoir.
Gotcha. Is there any opportunities to go to City of Boulder for any funds on any of these kind of extra measures that we're looking at for our wastewater treatment?
So I don't think,
Yeah,
oh, I was just, super quick, Chris, I was just gonna say, I don't think we would want to do so in 2023. That is the point of the alternative analysis for the tertiary filters, is to be able to assess what is needed there and then go to City of Boulder and say, this is our analysis and we'd like you to support with the funding. But Chris, sorry, go ahead if you wanna.
oh, you nailed it on the head, Miranda. The tertiary filters is kind of our bargaining chip with Boulder, because Boulder says, hey, clean this water a little bit more. This is our water source. You know, this is our drinking water source for Patasso. So we have a relationship there with our phosphorus removal, where we introduce ferric to our system. So this tertiary filter would help us as a bargaining chip to hopefully remove better and say, hey, if you guys throw down on this, we can make this process.
And I would say, so our current agreement with City of Boulder doesn't expire until 2024, which is why there's value in doing this analysis this upcoming year. So when it's time to renegotiate that agreement, we have that completed and can do exactly what you're saying, Trustee Severs, is identify the upgrades and talk about cost sharing with City of Boulder. Chris, do you want to jump into membranes for water?
I'd love to. So we're currently assessing our water system. It's been active and doing great and continues to do great, but the life expectancy of our membrane has reached its 10-year limit. So we're looking at replacement. And that's basically just our microfiltration. So it allows us to remove the turbidity from the water from our raw water source. These are the filters before your taps. So having a brand new membrane system would be amazing. We already get great removal with our system, but we have to undergo some maintenance where we do skid pinning, which is plugging these holes where these tubes rupture in the membranes. We've been doing it for years, and at a certain point, you know, these things need to be replaced. So we're at that point now.
And just to chime in on that, so there are two membranes. And so we are, the total would be 300,000. We are recommending just doing one at this time. We do think that we can continue on with the other, and then the goal would be to budget for the second membrane in 2024. Andrew, do you want to do fire hydrant in Big Springs?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So we have 166 fire hydrants that we maintain in our water system. And we have some that are out of service. Our master infrastructure plan and water model completed by JVA also identified low flow hydrants. And so the town in the master infrastructure plan has set a goal to replace 3 hydrants a year. And that's the budget that you see there. And the Big Springs pipeline freezing project, there's water mains in the Big Springs subdivision that were not installed deep enough to prevent freezing. Right now we have what we call bleeders, where we flow water through the water mains to keep a constant flow of water to prevent freezing. And again, the master infrastructure plan identified automatic bleeders that would make that process a little bit more efficient in terms of staff time and water usage.
Thanks, Chris and Andrew. Any questions about water? All right, I'm going to keep going. We already talked about the DDA, so I'm going to move on to employees. So we had to do a couple changes here, so I'd like to just quickly remove them. I had to remove a few positions from the budget. You all approved an administrative assistant under the 2022 budget. We greatly appreciate that, but ultimately when it came down to really crunching the numbers, we opted to take it out. So what that means is Peter remains in that role of administrative support manager. He will continue to support the front desk, but we'd like to try to look at how we can provide additional supports for that front desk with potentially that billing support specialist or some other personnel to free up Peter to continue to do the incredible public outreach and engagement that he does. Every summer, we hire temporary visitor center customer service representatives. We opted to take that out as well. What that means is we stick with a team of 3 who will then support all year long. That includes a visitor center manager and 2 customer service representatives. And this department is supported under Peter. The sustainability coordinator, back in when we were preparing the 2022 budget, we had talked about, adding in a new position. And at the time, the discussion was parks manager, sustainability coordinator, grants writer, and a co-responder. The board felt that parks manager was what we need to prioritize for this year, but there was a sentiment of trying to see how we could bring in our sustainability coordinator as a full-time employee within staff. Unfortunately, we did not put that into the budget, just given the current state of the general fund. Currently, Erica Thorley is our sustainability coordinator, and she is funded between a combination of town funds and a grant. And so we are keeping her budgeted as such, but of course there was interest and a desire to bring her in full time. Some things that weren't here, but some conversations we had held amongst the department heads was to bring on an extra streets and parks person to make those teams of 5. Ultimately, we did have to remove those as well. That being said, streets is a team of 3 right now, which makes them the smallest public works department in town. So we do still want to hire 1 streets operator, so which would make them a team of 4 in line with all the other departments. And then under the community center fund, as Rita noted, they're in a great financial position to bring on a part-time front desk receptionist for the community center. I've also made some salary adjustments to try and make the general fund work. Currently, sergeant, we reduced the top range by 5,000, which means the range is now 85 to 90 versus 85 to 95. And for police officers, we again reduced that top range by 5,000 to make it 65 to 70,000 versus 65 to 80. For staff, we are budgeting a 2% cost of living increase for all current staff. And then employees would be eligible to receive up to 2% merit based on their end of year evaluation completed by their supervisor. Questions about personnel changes?
Miranda, does this at all change the budget from what we saw in the email that you sent Monday? Has the budget? No. Okay, so the numbers haven't changed in the budget summary and the spreadsheets.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The spreadsheet already reflects these changes.
Okay, that's what we received in email.
Right.
Is that
exactly.
correct?
Yeah.
Monday. Okay.
We would, if the board desired to put back positions or make any sort of changes, that's when additional adjustments would be made in those salary line items. But currently, as it stands, is a reflection of what is on this PowerPoint slide.
Oh, okay, yeah, because the PowerPoint that we got in email yesterday is different than this PowerPoint right here.
Right. So I sent this new PowerPoint today, just a few early this afternoon, that had some of this additional information on it.
But the numbers haven't changed in the budget based on.
We just are highlighting a few more things that we realize would probably be important for you as the board to know, specifically being Erica not being in the budget, that position not being in the budget, and then budgeting for the cost of living and merit. Wanted to be sure you were aware that we're operating off those 4% increases.
Okay, thanks.
So Miranda, did you want to mention as far as the PD, since we reduced that, and really that did not make much of a difference. I mean, overall, that means too, then you will need to, I just want the board to know that means we'll have to tell these possible candidates that are in the running that we are changing those salaries. So that's an important piece that I feel the board needs to.
I don't know if that's a good idea, personally.
So I would say that in focusing on the marshal right now, we don't have, obviously I have a more robust marshal recruitment going because that's the key position. The sergeants I've spoken with the salary range was always comfortable, and you're never, it's bad form, I would say, to often pay a new employee at the top of a pay range, because it really stunts where they can go. So anyways, you would likely be paying them in the middle range as is in order to create that space for increases. So that's why I'm not concerned about the reduction here, because
Okay.
I don't think it would have been, I don't think it's always best to hire someone at the 95,000, because that is the top range. Now we don't have to.
Are we getting any luck on the streets operators at 20 an hour?
So Emmett did recently hire a new employee. What was that, 90 plus days ago? We have not posted for a new streets operator. But
Okay.
this is the range in which we have previously hired for parks and streets at $20 an hour. Obviously the goal, we'd love to go higher, and that was kind of a conversation, but currently, again, given the state of the general fund, felt it was best to leave it at $20 an hour at this time. And then there are opportunities for employees to make more money as they acquire CDLs and other certifications.
Okay.
But to your point, Trustee Corvalon, we could bump PD back up to the 525,000.
Well, no, I
just
hear
trying
what
to
you're
get
saying.
creative.
That you weren't going to probably hire them at the top anyway, so then it really doesn't make that big of a difference in the budget.
Right. Yeah, we just were trying to, like, what could we do? And this was one I just thought, because the recruitment effort is not as extensive for sergeants, police officers as it is for marshal, I would never want to adjust the marshal right now because we're too deep into that process. Sergeants and police officers, it's still in that really preliminary conversation phase. And so, if I let those employees know we've adjusted it and we start to lose candidates.
Yeah, that's what I'm scared of.
That would be a quick sign to realize that this is a problem. But I don't anticipate, in all the pre-screening I've done, that this $5,000 adjustment will make a huge impact on the recruitment efforts.
Okay.
Again, the way in which I've sold this to a lot of people or kind of shared it is it's a huge jump from where we were, right? And so either way, even if it's adjusted by 5,000, in some of these situations, it's $20,000 more than it was before.
Yeah.
So it's still we're still in a better position.
We hired the marshal at the rate for the sergeant, less than. So yeah.
Right. More the rate for police officers.
Yeah.
So
great. So hopefully this works out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just really quick then. So obviously tonight we're having our first work session. We'd like to do another work session on October 25th. That would be done hybrid. We originally had a work session scheduled for November 8th. However, Trustee Blakemore had noted that we really wouldn't have the information from the election by then. So it made more sense to have some additional budget discussions during the regular meeting on November 15th. We would then not have a work session on November 8th, but instead ask that the board have a special meeting on November 29th, which is when the public hearing would occur for the budget. We would then ask that the board consider approving the final budget on December 6th. And if for some reason the board wasn't ready to do so, we could always fall back to December 13th as that backup date. And last slide is, do you have any questions, comments, feedback? We have reached the 2 hours. And I know Tom, I don't know if Tom's still here. Tom had to jump off. And so I don't know if amongst the 4 board members who are here, if you want to give us some initial thoughts on the budget. My thought is maybe Karen, you lead this discussion, or Tanya, one of the more veteran trustees, since we don't have Tom to lead the discussion.
Oh, I don't care. Karen can do it if she wants.
So I think just the question before you is yeah, Jesse, or do you have questions, or do you have
One
questions,
comment.
comments?
Yeah, I have a comment on is it roughly $5 million that we have in a fund in cash in a separate bank account? Is there an opportunity for us to invest that? I mean, if we could do 6%, that's $300,000 on that. And also, can we leverage that and secure a credit line just for our overall financial resilience? And
So
just kind of what's our strategy with our surplus funds?
Okay, so I just want to make sure we all understand. We have about, as of today, 5.5 million in reserves, and again, of that, about 1.3 or 4 million is restricted. Okay, just to make that clear. Not sure about the other questions you have, actually.
Well, I don't know what restricted means, but
well, we talked about
hear
that.
what you're saying.
Restricted meaning, for the water and sewer fund, those restricted funds. So the 1 million, a little bit over 1 million, is restricted for the sewer fund. We can only use that for sewer and water fund for infrastructure improvement and expansions. And then the 147,000 that is allocated to the general fund for the use for the Eldora piece, the 36,500, and then the 110,000 from Boulder County Housing Authority. So that's what's restricted. The rest, obviously, are funds, and we're talking about that in each one of the funds. The general fund being the worst. That's what we would use. Those are reserves that we would use to cover the 300,000 deficit in the general fund. That is what we would use to do that.
So of the unused 5 million, do we have any notion of having that money make money for us with some kind of mutual fund investment, or if it's just sitting in a bank account in cash,
and not making
losing
much
value.
money at all? That is very true. And we have been talking, I cannot remember the name of the company, Miranda. I don't know if you remember, of someone that had contacted me about investing some of those funds. But to be honest with you, with what's been going on over the past 2 or 3 months, there was just no way I would have had time to, talk to this fellow. But we could reach back out to him and see if he wants to come, present to the board as far as investing some of our funds.
Yeah, because even if we had it in an index fund that was tracking with the stock market, obviously the stock market's in a slump at the moment, but also that could be considered a good time to get in because it has been slumping for a period of time now, and historically the stock market can do something like 7%, and if we were able to just do 6%, that's $300,000 on 5 million, just at 6%.
Right.
APR. So if we could do something modest, that could be a
Sure.
good source of recurring revenue for us.
And if the board is interested in that, I do think we should probably talk to that person. However, I'm not sure if stock market is what.
Sure, I just said that as an example. I'm not suggesting that that's where we go.
Sure.
I'm just saying that there's a lot of strategies.
Absolutely.
Ron Mitchell proposes this to the DDA often, and he's got, I think, now $500,000 in just a bond or something with a bank that's very low risk and it can be pulled out at any point with no penalty. So I know people were really nervous and didn't want to even do that, like a bond, but I think it makes a little bit of money, and then that whole barn against to create the credit in case we needed it in a future emergency. That's what Ron's been trying to get the DDA to do. It's a lot of people are not for it, but it makes sense to me. I know that you don't want to put all your money. Well, in a bond, it's pretty safe, but in the stock market, you wouldn't want to put everything in there because when you pull it out, it's not as easy as just pulling it out. But I would love to have this conversation, like Britt brought back up to the boardroom in a different day.
Yeah, I'd love to have a presentation from somebody if somebody's already offered, and learn what other cities are doing.
Have maybe Ron could come in with what he's doing for the DDA, explain that and the amount of money that it's generating, which it's not much, but it's better than the bank.
I think it was I just read his report. Wasn't it their interest is $3,000 some so far. So
right. So that's not very much, but
it's definitely not No,
But it's not nothing.
300,000, but yeah,
Right.
it would be tough to put all our savings.
Yeah,
that
it's kind of, it would scare me.
Yes,
But I
we
mean,
need to
there's
have the,
no,
well, anyway, if that's the interest of the board, I would be happy to reach out to that guy and see if he would want to come and do a presentation.
sure. I mean, I'd be into it.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it's
One
worth
other
just considering
question.
that, what Jesse and Tanya were talking about. Jesse, sorry to interrupt you. What were you saying?
One other question, just what are your disappointments, Miranda and Rita? I mean, you guys seems like it's a pretty well thought through, balanced budget as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, we maybe cut the admin role, but overall, I think you guys did a really good job presenting us with really reasonable budget. And what's not to like, in my opinion, like high level?
I think ultimately for me, it's the staffing. Recognizing that these teams do incredible things as small teams, right? Teams of 3, teams of 4, but one more person would allow parks and streets to do that much more. Also, that kind of recognition that our desire had always, or we were kind of moving the direction of bringing in that sustainability coordinator and not being able to make that work. And of course, I would always want to give higher wages, whether it's cost of living or merit. And so those are, I think, my disappointments is going to be from the staffing standpoint and just not being able to add to and or compensate more the current personnel that we have.
Well, if we
Yeah.
get that marijuana money, we'll have enough for a parks person.
Yes.
Or 2 even, maybe.
Well, I don't know if you, I mean, I guess I don't, I would caution maybe putting a personnel in on taxes that are still a bit unknown. I kind of feel like how Rita said is like Parks is going to have to live out its year, right? For us to really know what that fund is capable of. And so, that's, I definitely get that. And, even Erica and I talked a little bit about C&D funding sustainability coordinator. It's just, I wouldn't gamble on positions on revenue sources that are unknown. And so it's just the reality. It's an unfortunate reality, and this team has been
what does C&D stand for?
Construction and demolition. It's the money that you pay when you pull a building permit. And ideally, if you divert your materials, you can then get 70% of that money back. If you don't, then town gets to keep it. It's just not a stable revenue source, right? It's really a kind of a gamble on whether, right. So I just think that's my disappointment. I mean, it's the reality, and I agree. I think Rita and I were very thoughtful about where we had to make these cuts, and just this is where we landed, and very appreciative of the departments for being so understanding. But yes, if sky was the limit, we'd love to add back in those staff and those wage increases.
So you do have a staff.
Go ahead.
You do have a staff addition request for streets, but you know, in your ideal scenario, you would add more, and then additionally, you would like to increase their pay by more than the sort of the standard cost of living rate. And I'm in agreement with you on that. I would like for us to see a continued doubling down on our core services, being, public works, broadly speaking. That includes all the 3 departments and also the police. My bias is more towards the public works than the police, and I realize I may not be in the majority on that. That's fine, but personally, I really like to see us increasing our investment in our public works department, our streets, our parks, and our water. And that means, paying them well. I'd love to see our parity continue to move closer to other competing municipalities, and our equipment. I think I've gotten a brief little exposure to our equipment within the streets and public works in general. And I think that I would love to see us basically circulating equipment more frequently and selling old stuff and buying new stuff. And I don't know how that may or may not get worked into the budget, but our excavator, for example, is extremely old, and the maintenance to keep those old
machines running, at some point it just outweighs the cost of a new machine, and there's a lot of really good financing things that can be done with new machines as well. And I don't know if we could sell all of our old stuff and buy a few new things. I'm also inclined to not. I'm all for electrification and for sustainability and moving in that direction, but I would rather just get new trucks for the guys that are available and the gals that are available now, and know that we do intend to move towards electrification as it becomes available. But right now, when there's back order on that stuff, I think maybe we get new diesel and gas trucks and sell older stuff, and there's revenue there too in terms of selling that stuff. So that's my full list of comments, and I'll stop talking now so we can move on with the meeting. But just for future meetings as we circle back, those are the things that are kind of top of mind for me.
Well, I wanted to, my disappointment was we worked so hard on cutting all these different line items, and we're still in the negative 335,000. That's very disappointing to me. But I do want everybody to know or realize, particularly in the parks department, and same with the PD actually, what I have to do. And for example, health insurance is a big one, right? I have to budget at the highest when I do those type of, and those are high ones. Health insurance is huge, right? And in the police department, that's everybody but our current employee, Troy, that I know which plan he chose. So, those are all just items that we had to go so high. So really that was just a disappointing fact that we had to cut all these positions. And, I'll be honest with you, we did have COLA higher at one point. We also had the merit higher. But when we saw the outcome, we go, we cannot do that, So, but again, I do want the board to really understand what 2020 and 21 actuals, what really happened and how we increased our fund balance. I think that's such important information. As I was telling Karen earlier, I believe the general fund, this is the worst case scenario we're looking at. Oh, and we do need to talk about computers. It could get worse, but what I'm thinking is though, hoping that maybe some of the ballots will, some of those items will go through, and that of course would help, right? I do want to, I don't know if we do need to talk about the computers. You all got the list and what Randy is recommending. Go ahead.
Sorry, Rita, I was going to say my recommendation might be for the Board of Trustees to email us independently your thoughts on the computers versus diving into that tonight. And then we can start to plug in those numbers based on what the feedback is you provide us into the figures for the next budget work session.
I know one more thing I wanted to say is, of course, it is kind of scary when you look at the general fund. And if we were to think, oh, wow, we cannot, of course, that's not sustainable, right? To go into the negative bounds, 330,000 every year, right? The reason I think it might be okay is, like I said, 23 is such a different year. We don't know what the Parks Department will do. We don't know what the PD will do. And then again, I'm hoping for additional revenue. So I think this is just kind of one of those years where we may just have to use reserve funds to make it for 23 to balance the budget. And we'll then have to revisit on, for 2024, maybe by July, August of next year. We'll have to revisit and see where we're at, and you'll see that the monthly financials I provide to you where we're at. So that's kind of my thoughts for the general fund.
Thank you, Rita, for telling us how you feel about the budget. And thank you, Miranda, for the same thing, and Jesse for your very detailed list of comments. So Tanya, did you have anything else?
No, I don't think I do right now. with the computers, I assume, like, are we going to get a second opinion on quotes, or we just go with the same company we've been using?
You know, another thought, Tanya, now that you brought that up, is what we could always do, right? We could just, the server, I'm not so sure, but we could just say, let's just go with what we have, right? And if a computer, because of the budget situation that we're in, right? And if for some reason a computer goes down next year, we'll just have to fix it, right? We'll have to do it. But that's just really postponing the inevitable. I mean, we'll have to do that. Some of those computers are old, all of them, right? So that's just an idea. We could just wait on all that. Not sure about the server though. I'm not going to say anything on that. I mean, you see, I think I made some comments in red from my conversation with Randy. That would just be something, you know, that I guess we would need the board to send us their feedback.
Yeah. Miranda, will you let the other board members know that you're seeking feedback? And then I guess we discuss the computer upgrades at the next budget session. Yes. And Nicole, how about your feedback in general on the where we are currently with the 2023 budget?
We can't hear you.
Oh, weird. We could hear her earlier.
I see she is off mute. Oh wait.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's so weird. I don't even know. Is this okay?
Yes.
Okay.
That's good.
No, so thank you for your guys' work on this. Rita and Miranda, I know how hard it is to put these together, so thank you so much. I don't have anything to say outside of what's already been said. I do have some ongoing questions, and so I'll just email you those directly just so that we can kind of finish up our night here. So.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. So I think I'm the fourth trustee here tonight that's left. And I would really like to see our operating expenses be less than or equal to our non-grant revenue each year. And I'd really like to see us actually contributing to the fund balance in the general fund. And the general fund is the one that I'm concerned with, not the other funds. I'd like to see us contributing to that fund balance every year. I don't know how much would be appropriate. And then spending that fund balance on capital items like the budget. So that's what I would be looking for in a 2023 budget. And I would leave that to staff to determine how to make that happen. So Miranda, should I open this up to the public?
That would be up to you if you wanted to do quick public comment or ask people, however you want to work that.
Yeah, I guess I would like public comments since I think we have some folks from the public on that we haven't heard from yet. And so it would be a good opportunity to hear what their take is at this time on what we have for the 2023 budget. So if you could raise your hand, you could start talking. If you're on the phone, it's, what is it, star
6.
Star 6. And I forgot to say, I really appreciate all the work that Miranda and Rita have done on this budget. I think it's really great. But it's just the deficit that I'm looking at that I would like to see us somehow get the operating expenses in line with the non-grant revenue.
So I think what one of our asks, and I'm not sure if there's public comment, would be some recommendations. And Rita, I don't want to speak for you, but I think we are both at this point where we are not sure what else to do. And so if there are certain expenditures that maybe you feel like we go without, you know, whatever that might be, we would love that feedback. And so email it to us. We've done numerous passes at this and it was much worse. And so where we are today is better than where we were. But again, we recognize it's still not great, but there is a feeling of that we're at kind of that bare minimum place. And so we'd love to hear from the trustees, maybe where you feel like we could make additional adjustments.
Agreed.
Well, there is the FEMA grant that we looking at that, you may find that we can add some to the revenue.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that.
Can we make a motion to adjourn?
Yes, I'm not second.
Okay, good
I
night,
think
everybody.
it's a work session. We can just say goodbye.
Perfect. Thank you. Say goodbye.
Yeah.
I appreciate all this. I'm just getting really kind of tired, and this could go on and on forever.
Yes, agree. We have plenty more times to do this. So we'll talk to you all on the 25th about the budget, but of course, meeting next week.
Great. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody. Good night.
Bye.